Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone, welcome to the fifth episode of season 2 of the Shaherald Nightlife, titled American Roman Catholic Health Coach Embraces Islam. So tonight we are very blessed to have a sister all the way from the US, Florida, to share her story on how she came to embrace Islam. Before we begin, I'd just like to introduce you to the panelists here. On the top right, we have Brother Kaven Siddiq Lim, all the way from Singapore. He also manages Convert Central, and tonight we are so pleased to have him also on the panel to ask any questions that you have related to her story later. And on the bottom right, we have Brother Iskander all the way from Netherlands. Thank you again for always, being part of this stream. We are very blessed to have you also in. And next, the show of tonight, without much further ado, I'd like to bring forward Sister Danielle. So, Sister Danielle, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Thank you for joining us today and to share your story. Maybe before we begin, you could share with us a brief introduction of yourself, a bit about Florida. I heard it's a sunny place.
It's
so,
very
take it away.
sure. So I was actually born in New York to a Roman Catholic family. We were not very religious, but I did grow up, studying the religion at Sunday school and attending church and events, for holidays and things like that. I had a really nice upbringing with a really loving family, close knit. I have 3 younger sisters. Both of my parents are alive and together. And then I embraced Islam around the time when I was about 22 years old.
Wow, mashallah. So, quite curious. Okay, maybe share with us a bit about what do you do as a Roman Catholic when you were young, and eventually how did you come to become an agnostic?
Okay. So, as a child, I went to the classes that I was put in by my family. So I did take the Sunday school classes, and there we would learn about the religion. And the thing I remember the most about those classes was like the juice and cookies that we got. So, but I do remember asking questions about Jesus and, things that didn't quite make sense to me. I do remember asking the teacher questions and, sort of a sense of not really fully being satisfied or really engaged with the learning that I did there. And just kind of having to get through that time, as I got older, knowing I had to go there, just studying and not really thinking much about it for the most part. When I became more of an agnostic, it was towards, I guess, high school and towards college age. And I just started questioning everything in the world around me and being very critical. So very, very critical. And then I ended up, being interested in things like critical thinking as a study subject. But when it came to religion, I just felt that people are just blindly following this stuff. They don't really know if it's true or not. They're just relying on it to sort of get them through life and not really critically thinking about it or studying it. Like most people that I knew didn't actually know very much about the Bible or know very much about what the religion really was or where it came from. And they were just kind of following it because of the fact that it was a tradition in their family and it's kind of what's expected of you, and then just passing that on to their kids because that's what you're supposed to do. And so for me, I started I was a bit of a rebel in general. So I started rebelling against all kinds of social norms, like how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to look, and which was a boon to my family. And it gave everyone a pretty hard time, through my high school years. But it really led me to, and I was actually pretty arrogant about it as well in my young age. I thought that people were just so mistaken and so misled. And I felt kind of above that at that time. So I was really humbled later when I actually started studying and reading and researching it rather than just forming this opinion, based on my limited experience.
So during that time, okay, I myself also was quite a rebel, and I do question a lot of things, and that I studied philosophy, so that
Mhm.
kind of made me question more things about existentialism and stuff. Um,
Me too.
so how come you didn't want a religion to sort of guide you at the time? Did you think that it was like a man-made thing at that point in time?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I also studied philosophy. I studied philosophy, like existentialism was actually my favorite to read. I had all of the books. And then I got into political philosophy. And so when I got into political philosophy and sort of politics, that's when I started to think more about religion. So religion was kind of really in the background and not really something in my mind for a long time, other than when I saw people like giving out Bibles on the corner, I would kind of snicker at them or laugh at them and, just kind of feel above them for that moment. But it wasn't really something I was thinking about. But when I started studying political philosophy, that's when I thought, you know what, like these political philosophies are pretty much religion. They're trying to create a way of life for humanity. But everybody knows that political philosophies are man-made. Nobody's questioning that. But everyone seems to believe that religions are, from God, from this higher power, and that they're, divinely sent down, and there's, you can't question them. Whereas like political philosophies, you can find so many faults in them. And, nobody's questioning that because obviously they're from humans. So there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be iteration. And so I thought the best, I came up with this idea, which I thought was brilliant at the time, to compare methodically political philosophy and religion. And I thought by breaking those two down together, I could show that religions were basically just political philosophies from back in the day, created by humans. And maybe they added on this thing of like, oh, it's from God, to try to get people to actually follow them. And so that's really what set me out on the path of really learning and studying religion in general, and starting to look into, so from reading philosophy books and books on critical thinking and books on political philosophy, then I started to move into like, well, now I actually need to read the full Bible. Now I need to read about Buddhism. I need to read the Bhagavad Gita and understand Hinduism. And so that really, that began, that set me on that
Wow.
path.
Also, you actually look into other religions, including Christianity, look deeper into them. Did
Yeah.
you have questions for like your priest or pastor at the time? And um, I mean, kind of like, did they get you the answers that you needed when you were on this journey?
That's a good question. I actually didn't. I was such a kind of, I guess, independent person at the time where I didn't rely. In fact, I guess I was also critical of people and their opinions. So I wasn't inclined at all to rely on people for answers about anything. Even when I started studying Islam, I didn't actually really go until for some time to actual Muslims and ask questions about it. It was all like internal and just me and the books.
I see. And so did you tell your parents after that, like, I'm on this journey now, and I don't think I want to be a Catholic? Are they open to that idea at the time?
So that took some time. And in that moment, like I said, I had been pretty much a rebel. So I had given my family a really hard time multiple times. Part of my journey towards Islam involved me traveling overseas, and they were very, very against it. And I ended up doing it anyway. So I really did things that I wanted to do, regardless of what other people, other people's opinions, other people's pleas with me. And so at that time, I didn't actually explain very well what I was doing, like what was going on. I don't think they knew really anything that I had been going through and like what I had been studying, all the research I was doing. I didn't really share that with them. It was really so personal, and I really had kept it to myself for the most part, even from pretty much, I mean, my friends may have known a little bit, but I think for me, it was just so personal, and I was not really sharing much about it. So when it did come out, it was much later. So it was like, oh, by the way, like I went through all of this and I made this decision, and now I'm a Muslim. So it was pretty much,
Mhm.
it was a shock in that way, but it wasn't a shock because I had already been, um, causing trouble in various ways, doing things that people thought were, people didn't understand, I guess. So
Yeah, I think I pretty much understand the situation you're in. I'm also kind of like probably the black sheep in the family.
Yeah.
The guy
But
who challenged everything. Yeah.
yeah.
So how okay, I'm so curious now because you seem like someone who has a lot of freedom, someone who enjoys freedom, someone who would, challenge the social norm. How, did you get yourself into a religion that apparently is quite restrictive, right? You have to put a hijab on and stuff like that. So how did you, transit from there to Islam?
Well, that's a really good question. It's kind of fascinating, I guess, when you put it that way. Um, so I think it's because I wasn't looking at it that way at all. Like my intention was just to know the truth. Like everything I was doing was for me to be able to understand the truth. And even though my intention in the beginning was like I already believed that religions were man-made, all religions, um, I was also open to really looking at the evidence and understanding it and then following that. And so it wasn't about at all like, well, what does this actually mean to me? Other than the moment when I did actually realize that Islam is the truth and that I had a really big choice to make. Do I accept it or do I just pretend I didn't know it? um, that was really the moment where I was like that those things kind of came to me in a second. And it wasn't really about like, oh, I'm going to have to wear hijab or I'm going to have to eat this way. Because honestly, when you read the Qur'an, which is my entry point to Islam, was reading the Qur'an, it's not presented in that way at all, which you guys know. You don't read the Qur'an and it's not like a list of rules. It's not like the 10 Commandments, um, where you're just reading like, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. What it does is that it actually speaks first to your heart and it speaks first to your soul, and it gives you the information about why you're on earth and how you got here and what your goal is in life, where you're headed. And once you see it from that perspective, anything you have to do is just about kind of following that roadmap towards success. And so, and there's a hadith, you guys probably know, from the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, Aisha, peace be upon him, and may Allah be pleased with her, where she said, if the first thing revealed from God was don't drink alcohol or don't commit fornication, the people would have said, we'll never stop drinking and we'll never stop fornicating. But what really happened was that first, God prepared the people's hearts and souls, and he guided them to what their purpose in life was. And he gave them that knowledge of who he is, so that people were in love with their creator. And they realized that their creator's only intention in terms of telling them what to do or what's right and wrong is to protect them from what's harmful and guide them towards what's beneficial. Then it's so much different when you follow the rules, because now you're following the rules because they help you stay on this path towards what you really, really want, which is success in this life and the next. And because you love your creator, because now you know who he is, those things are very easy to do. Like, what would you do for someone who's beloved to you? Especially when they have your best interest in at heart, right? So God has our best interest at heart. He is our creator and knows what's best for us. And then also he's giving us these instructions so that we can be successful, not so that he can make things hard for us. And then I think, that the whole idea that Islam is easy, it's intended, even in the Quran, God says that he intends for us ease, not hardship. And so these things they really are easy when you're coming from the right place. It's hard if you're just like a random person who doesn't know anything about God and doesn't know anything about Islam or why they're on earth, and they don't have that real like love in their heart. And you're like, wear this, do this. That's going to be very harsh and that's going to be impossible. And we know that from Islam as well. So for me, it was really like, and because I did it on my own, I didn't have the pressure of people telling me what to do. I did it on my own pace. I learned in my own way, and I really inculcated that faith and that belief first. Then I began to implement, like, for example, hijab. It was at least a year or maybe even more before I started wearing hijab. And when I did, I wanted to so badly. And like the thing that was stopping me was like, well, what are people going to say? How are people going to treat me? How am I going to explain this to people? But in my heart, it was like weeks and weeks of like, I want to wear hijab so bad. You know, it was like
Wow.
real desire. So it's a completely different way of kind of coming at it, I guess.
MashaAllah, that's such a beautiful observation that you have of the Quran. And I think you put it really beautifully. Like, people see restrictions as something that they don't like to do and it's stopping them from being free. But what you're saying is these restrictions are like a form of guidance, because we are seeking guidance from the Creator, right? And the Creator is the best person to understand all his creations,
Yeah.
and therefore it's give you this instruction to follow so that it will help you to reach a successful hereafter. Mashallah. I think brother Kevin have a question for you too. Okay, brother Kevin,
Okay.
yes, what question is it?
Hi, sis Daniela. I wanted to ask you, and thank you so much for sharing your story. First, I think it was very interesting that coming to Islam, your approach to Islam was something that was very balanced, and I really enjoyed that sharing. So I wanted to ask you that how did you then, like in your pursuit of Islam, discover that Islam was the truth, and what made you eventually decide to take a leap of faith by taking the Shahada?
Thank you so much for your question. So the path was actually like, I feel like it started so much longer before I even knew or had Islam in my mind. It was because I really wanted to. I wanted to know the truth. So even though I was doing all of that study and books and trying to prove religion was false, at the same time, I had a question in my mind. Like I would look at the sky and say, like, just the world is incredible. And I became kind of childlike in my curiosity about the world. And then that led me to want to know. Like, I remember actually asking something out there. I want to know. Like, I just want to know what, like, obviously, this is incredible. Look at the sky, look at the stars, look at the earth. Um, where does it come from? What is it? Is there a force out there? Like, I did want to know. I had that desire in my heart. And so, the path that led me there was really long. What made me decide to actually declare my faith was after traveling overseas and spending time with some Muslims and seeing their lives and how they lived, especially under very extreme circumstances. And that had been after I had read the Quran for a year at that point. And it gave me the opportunity to hear the Quran recited, which was very powerful. But I studied for a couple months after that, like very intensely, reading anything and everything I could about Islam. And it was from that, through those studies, where I thought, this is the actual truth. Like, this isn't just about like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? It was like, this is actually fact and truth. And so that's where I was posed with that decision to make. Do I accept it? Do I go with what I know now? Or do I just pretend none of this ever happened and go about my life as I did before? And so that was really the moment. And my Shahada itself was actually just me on the street by myself, me and God, just declaring the Shahada to God directly. And nobody at the time actually knew about it. But that was because of that kind of crossroads I reached.
Sounds like a very beautiful experience you had with Muslims in the Muslim lands. Whereabouts did you go to, as in to visit the Muslims?
So I actually went to Palestine. I was in the West Bank.
Wow.
This has to do with my political interest at the time. So
Okay.
yeah.
Wow, beautiful. So, what was it beautiful that you noticed about Muslims that was different from what you see in normal day to day life?
Well, I think so. First of all, not all of the Muslims that I met were actually practicing Islam. One of the things that for example, for me, having had been reading the Quran, I knew at that time, like, okay, these are Muslims. And so, like, for example, the adhan, which is the call to prayer, would be announced, or it's pretty much sung, right, 5 times a day, and you can hear it everywhere. And for me, in my heart, it was like so beautiful. And a lot of the Muslims around me, they were all talking and joking and messing around. And I was actually getting irritated by them because I had my tape recorder, because this is a long time ago. I had my tape recorder and I would record the adhan, and I'd be frustrated, like, these guys are making noise over here and over there. Like, I want to hear this. And so, you know, there was that part of it where it was it was that adhan that reached my heart. And it was the recitation of the Qur'an that I heard that reached my heart. And then when it comes to the behavior of the Muslims, yes, like, I mean, there was a woman standing in front of her house, what used to be her house, that had just been demolished, with all of her belongings inside, all of her money, anything that they ever had, and the whole entire family, everything was in the home and it was destroyed. And she's standing in front of it saying, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. So I asked, like, what is she saying? And they're like, oh, it means thank God. I'm like, thank God? How is she thanking God when her house just got destroyed and demolished to pieces and she doesn't know what, you know, like, how can anyone thank God in a situation like that? So part of it was just that fortitude and that commitment to still being thankful, still being faithful, still being kind. Like, many, you know, there's all different people everywhere. So I saw the whole spectrum of people, the people who are super angry, they want revenge, they want to do bad things, to the people who are like, this is God's will and I'm going to make the best of it. And I'm going to come out of this with the most pure soul I possibly can. And so it was those people who kept remembering, like, no matter what happens, it's from God. And no matter what happens, I'm responsible to maintain my faith, to maintain my gratitude, to maintain, like, my memory of what this life is all about. And so that was so powerful to me, seeing people under those circumstances still with so much goodness, so much generosity. Like, we went to houses where the people were not able to leave their homes for 30 days. So they had very little food, but whatever little food they did have, they made it like a banquet for us, for these visitors that were coming. And we were supposed to be there to help them, but they were pouring everything they had into just serving us for that short time. And they would sit on the side. I didn't know what was going on, right? They would sit on, yeah, it was just that they were waiting for their guests to eat so that they could eat whatever was left over because they had so little. So it was so many different things while I was there. But really that faithfulness and that commitment, and that the commitment to goodness and kindness and peace in their own heart, even though there wasn't peace in their external environment.
Yeah, I think what you said is really beautiful. I can imagine, someone who is really poor, or, is really struggling to survive with the so little amount of food that they have, and yet they put themselves out there to feed their guests, because you have entered their lives and they really want to welcome you. Oops, no worries. Yeah. So, so I think, this alone shows a lot about the character that they're trying to portray, in the hadiths, about, how they should treat their guests. And so they are very, this alone is a very powerful action from the Muslims that you met. I mean, yeah, of course, all of us are imperfect people. There are, in any religion also, you can find, people who really practice it, and people who just, just go by the motion, right? So we should not look at the people, but more look into the holy scriptures that we have, and you'll be guided in a beautiful way. Also, a brother here has a question about Arabic. Maybe Kevin, you have that question, right? Oh, it's Iskandar.
Yeah, I think Brother Iskandar.
Oh, brother Iskandar. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, salam alaikum, Sister Danielle. Yeah, I was wondering, because you said you went to Palestine, right? So did you communicate with these people in English or more in Arabic, or because it seems even more extraordinary that people who don't even speak your language would treat you like this, right? So I was just wondering.
Yeah. So actually a lot of people spoke English. And so that's kind of the funny thing with Americans, right? We usually only know one language and everyone else seems to know more than one language. So yeah, most of the people could communicate with me in English. And even the people who didn't weren't fluent in English, they knew enough English for sort of basics. And then while I was there, and before I left as well, I prepared a little bit to understand, some basic Arabic, just words and phrases. And I tried to pick up more while I was there. And then people were so generous as well. So they taught me like how to write my name in Arabic. They taught me the Arabic alphabet, and they were trying to teach me, more Arabic as well. So that was nice because I had a little bit of familiarity with Arabic before accepting Islam.
Beautiful. I think their honesty, helping you and all that. I think is really beautiful. Maybe share with us also a bit about, okay, now you're coming to the challenges that you face, maybe learning with Arabic and stuff. Do you have any misconceptions about Islam, before you became a Muslim? Maybe you can share with us what were your misconceptions that you had.
Yeah, definitely. I had a fair amount of misconceptions, not all conscious, because growing up here in the United States, there's a big influence of Orientalism on a lot of the media that we kind of consume. And so Americans tend to grow up with these little hints about Islam in all of the movies and TV shows and books. And so you'll see and even nowadays it still happens. Like I watch some seemingly innocent movie with my kids, and when there's the bad guys, it looks like Morocco, like what is that? And so there's a lot of that which is unconscious. So you're just unconsciously fed these ideas and these sort of images of what a Muslim is growing up. And so yeah, that was there. Then of course 9/11 happened, and I was actually in Brooklyn during that time studying at college, and my college classroom that I had that morning at 9 a.m. was facing the Twin Towers. And so I watched it happen with my own eyes. I experienced the aftermath. I smelled the death and burning in the air for months afterwards, and that was incredibly I don't want to say traumatic, but it made a huge impact on me, and it was a lot of suffering, to go through at that time. And so I had already kind of embarked on this religion is man-made journey. And so when this happened, it was like, well, now this is even better. Not only am I going to prove that religions are man-made, but I can throw this one to the dirt, kick it to the curb and show everybody that Islam is just a big sham, just like everything else. So, at that moment, without really knowing much and just kind of hearing that there may be a tie between something like a terrorist attack and Islam, obviously it's a huge misconception, which not only I had to a degree, but, everyone else had. And then me being a critical thinker, right, and someone who always challenged every single thing I encountered, obviously I wasn't going to take it at face value, but I was going to look into this. And it was like my initial understanding was that there is some kind of connection between the religion itself and then this horrific attack. So I think that was probably the biggest misconception. But everything else, of course, was there too, like just from the subliminal messaging, like, how women are treated, and that it's foreign, I think that's probably the biggest misconception, which I really going to just take a minute to say that here, is that it's foreign, that Islam is like for these other people somewhere else, and that it has something to do with ethnicity or where you live, and not that it's actually a universal message that's intended for every single human being on the planet.
I'm really glad you said this because I mean, personally, I also had a lot of misconception when 9/11 happened. I saw it on TV. I was 14 years old then, and in the school and the news, everyone was talking about Twin Towers and stuff. And afterwards in school, we also saw some, I would say, things that are not right, like for example the beheading videos and stuff, which you're not supposed to be seeing that at that age, but I don't know how I got to see it. But when we saw those things, we're like, oh no, this is not a good religion at all. Like
Yeah.
these people ought to go to jail or something, right? So I had such a big impact on me. I see the whole religion as maybe demonic in some sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Astaghfirullah. And here I am today here as a Muslim myself. Yeah, and that's a funny thing, right? Yeah, and I mean the subliminal messages that you said. I mean, like people like to brand it as, you know, in Singapore maybe Malay Muslim, right? Malay is the ethnicity and a Muslim, but Muslims are for is universal, it's for every religion, and as long as your culture does not, you know, put the religion, the laws of the religion aside, and is following the laws, you can still practice your culture. And people do not see that most of the time. They just think it's an Arab religion or maybe a Malay religion here in Southeast Asia. And yeah, and they like to use the word like Islamic terrorists, right?
Yeah,
They use their religion, you know, first, and terrorists, but it's always a few bad eggs that, you know, people start to zero in and think that the whole religion is like that. I think you perfectly shared that in your conversation. So what were, like, you know, the challenges that you faced yourself? Like, I mean, you shared about the misconception. So maybe, you know, you have read about other religion, and what why was Islam the only one that stood out of all the religions that you researched on?
So I had read the books, like I had the Bhagavad Gita, at least some form of it, and I had, you know, read about Buddhism. And you know, they were interesting, and I read them and I understood it. And you know, it was a bit of a struggle to get through the Bhagavad Gita, I'll admit. Then when I was reading the Bible, that was also a big struggle to read and to understand, like to follow, like what's the point of all this book, you know, like where is this going, and the connection between the different chapters and the different stories and stuff like that. So when I was reading it, it was very much like, okay, I'm reading this for a project. I need to just understand this as best I can. Then when I began reading the Qur'an was not, it was just not like those other books. It was like it was talking to me. Like I actually would open it. So I used to carry it with me as I traveled around the city in the subway system, the underground trains. I don't know if you guys know the names, but so I remember opening it, like something was going on in my life, opening the Quran, reading from where I had left off the day before or the time before, and the Quran is helping me with my life, like with the thing that just happened just now, you know, like it's giving me exactly what I needed to hear or to guide me through that challenge in real time. And I'm like, okay, this book is really old, like it's more than 1,000 years old, but it seems to connect with my life right now. And so that's why the more I read it, it was like it was communicating directly to me every time. And the other books had been, you know, not even close to anything like that experience. And so the other books fell away and I stopped reading other books, and I just had this Quran with me all the time. And I still have it, alhamdulillah. Like the cover fell off, and, you know, I was like so used from just constantly reading it. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that there was so much in the Quran that is like just absolutely mind-blowing when you think about it. So for example, I remember when I read the ayah that, you know, which I think is referring maybe to the Big Bang, which is still a theory, but it says in the Quran that everything was together and that he split it apart. And that's talking about the creation of the heavens. And I was like, Big Bang, anybody? Like, this is, you know, it's aligning with what we seem to start to be learning about the universe from, you know, using our mechanisms that we have now. The other one was that he created everything from water. Now, no matter what way you want to look at it, no matter what they say in science, whether you're talking about, you know, just whatever theories they have, humans are made up mostly of water, you know, more than around 70% water. And it just that it doesn't leave room. Like if you learn something in the world, like through observation, it aligns with the Quran. And so that's also really huge. And then the other thing was just the way the Quran speaks. It's not, it's obviously like nowadays too, like I've recently read or started to read the Book of Mormon. And it's just so different. You can just tell when a book is written by a person, right? This book, when you read the Qur'an, it's not the same. And there's a lot of it where you can just feel it, that it's not written by a human being.
Yes. I mean, I also had that feeling. One of the part of my reversion was I asked God, and He spoke to me through the Quran in some sense.
Yeah,
Oh, you
yeah.
can see that video later. Yeah. So yeah, I understand exactly perfectly how you feel. Yeah.
Mhm.
So were there any challenges after becoming Muslim?
Yeah, I mean, one of them was that, you know, I was an anti-religious person. So trying to explain to people that now I'm a very religious person, it was really hard. And since I had done most of the work that I was doing by myself without really sharing what was going on with many people, pretty much anyone that I encountered, I would have to explain this to them. And so I remember I was actually in my last semester of college, and people asking me like, so what do you want to do after you graduate? And my answer every time was like, oh, I want to study Islam more. And they were just like, what? And that's before I told people like I am a Muslim, but I already was at the moment. I just told them all I want to do is study Islam. And so I got a lot of pushback like, oh, well, how could that be? Like, don't you know how they treat women? Like, what are you thinking? Are you crazy? And then some people will just be like, okay, with a little face of like, that's really weird. All right. And then going back with my family, of course, it was really awkward because now like I'm all about this. Like I want to like live, think, eat, breathe, you know, and drink Islam all the time. And it's just a bit much for your family, you know. So I was a bit overzealous. So that created a bit of friction. And then you know, just it's hard to make people understand what you're going through when you've already been through such a long journey and everything makes sense in your mind, but now all of a sudden you have to explain it to people who haven't been along the ride with you. It just doesn't make much sense. And then there's a lot of fear. So my family, I believe they had a lot of fear. Like one of my sisters was very compassionate and, you know, literally crying, and she said, I'm just worried for you, I'm afraid for you. Like, what's going to happen to you? How are you going to be treated? You know, like, is this the right choice? And I got a lot of that, like with a lot of love, because thank God my family is very loving. I just got a lot of that worry and fear for me and my well-being. Like, are you making a choice that's going to hurt you in the long run? So, you know, and then for me, so I guess it would be that, just the people who care about you, trying to reassure them. And then also the awkwardness of having to explain that I went from being this like rebel, critical thinker, anti-religion person to, you know, a faithful Muslim that looks almost like a nun. So
Yes. I would say that, you know, you are an awakened soul. And I myself, when we first are awakened, you know, like from the Matrix or something, we just get awake. And
yeah,
we
that's a
just
good one.
wanted so badly to tell people there's a beautiful world outside this cave, right?
Mhm.
And Islam is the truth, and therefore, you know, you try your best to show it to them, and they just don't see it, and you get overzealous. It
Yeah,
happens to new reverts. Like most of us have this fire in us to tell people this is the truth. And yeah, I also had some friction initially trying to explain it to my family, and realized over time that it wasn't really so much what you say. Sometimes it becomes more like how they feel around you, how they
yeah,
experience Islam around you. And I think we learn it over time, right?
yeah, yeah. Sometimes a long time, but yes.
Yeah, it takes a long time, but
Yeah,
inshallah, they I know that they love us, and these are just probably they are just concerned of us, and they are afraid that, you know, we might end up like how the media shows us, right, turning to terrorists or something, which is not true.
right, exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So next question is like so after you've become a Muslim, maybe do you have you say you're a health coach as well, right? I think
Mhm.
Brother Iskander have a question related to health here. Brother Iskander.
Oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, no, I was just wondering what a health coach is. So could you explain that?
Okay.
Transformative health coach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually a fitness and nutrition coach. So I help women. I work with women, and we work towards basically, so I see it that we're made up of the mind, body, heart, and soul, and they're separate but inseparable parts. And so my work is really about reconnecting those parts so people can live the healthiest, happiest life, and then really honoring their body as well, because we're transversing this life in a body. And so caring for that body is something that we sometimes take for granted, or we sometimes put to the side, but actually it's connected, and the way that we respect and honor our bodies really impacts the way that we function in the rest of our lives. So I help women through various means. So sometimes I do fitness classes. I also do like one-on-one coaching, and I work with women to just really up level their life to, you know, have more vitality, have better health, feel better about themselves, so that they can basically, you know, go and achieve more in their lives.
Oh,
That
beautiful.
actually sounds like you're a classical doctor, right? Because it seems that in Western medicine, it's all about, you know, curing the symptoms. If you've got a disease or a pathological factor, you know, you try to cure it. Whereas I think that in the past, doctors used to be more about holistic approaches and, you know, trying to prevent diseases. Is that something that you're also about, like disease prevention?
Yes, it's that's huge, because so much disease is related to a few things. One of them can be inflammation, which has to do with our habits, and you know, eating habits, and also just our behaviors and habits and of our mind and our emotions. And then on the other end, you have the mental side, so the mindset side, and you know, really setting yourself up for success and health in your life. And you're right, like that's what people used to do, prevention and helping people live healthy lives. And nowadays, the medical industry definitely is more towards like treating the symptoms and just really looking at the symptoms, not really looking at where they came from, what they mean. And those are actually signals from our bodies to us. So we're very disconnected in that sense. So that's why I love that idea of like reconnecting the different parts of a human being, so you can live a more whole life. But for sure, the holistic approach is what I'm all about.
Mashallah. My wife is also a personal health coach herself. And I think you probably already know this, but you know, in the Quran, it says about eating not just halal food, but also toiban, which
Yeah.
is wholesome food. And also, do you maybe read before about the medicine of the Prophet?
Yeah.
Have you? Yeah,
Yeah.
probably you have read this book. Yeah, so the Prophet gave us some ideas, you know, how to be healthy, and that certain food that you take can actually heal you better. And
Yeah.
of course, so if we read in Quran itself, has a potential of healing you physically and spiritually. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
And
per-
yeah, I agree.
yeah,
And now in science, it's amazing, because just like science is coming up to speed in terms of like the cosmos and what happened in the universe, same thing with the human body. So like what you mentioned about the Quran, like now they're finding out the benefits, the huge impact that, for example, meditation has. Like if you meditate for I think it's something like 10 or 20 minutes a day for like 5 days, you can literally increase your immune system by 50%. It's effectiveness. And what is the prayer? It's essentially a meditation. What is it when you're sitting there making dhikr, making dua? It's in a meditation. And so these things are built into Islam that really benefit the human being on all levels. And then, you know, we're just finding out about these things in science. And same thing with the food. Like now we know what does a strawberry do. You know, there's things inside the strawberry. The acid in the strawberry helps your immune system clear out you know, structures that are harmful to you. So, you know, we're learning about these things in science. So I really love sort of discovering the new science that's coming out, and how it really bolsters and supports what we already had in Islam, you know, forever, or not forever, but for 1400 years. So it's amazing.
yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, I think what you said about holistic approach is it's funny because you know people look at it as going backwards, but actually these things have already been discovered a long time ago. Somehow the
Yeah.
knowledge was lost.
Yeah.
People look at science in the sense that you need to get some drugs or something to in order to heal yourself, but actually the earth is something that God has blessed you with all the benefits that you need to heal yourself. And I like that approach that you is talking about, holistic approach. Perfect, beautifully said. Do the panelists have any other questions, because we are coming to the end of the stream, and I just want to get an advice from Sister Danielle for people who are probably still in search for the meaning of life, maybe, or people who are starting out as new reverts. What would you advise them? But do the panelists have any questions? Any more questions? No. Okay, good. Yeah. So
can I ask a question, Brother Firdaus?
yes.
Alhamdulillah. Can I ask a question if that's okay?
Okay.
Alhamdulillah. So I really like your story, sister, and I really see like parts of your story that I can relate a lot to. So I recall when I was learning Islam when I was 18 years old then, and I think contrary to your experience, I was kind of hiding my journey towards learning Islam, because at the point of time, learning Islam didn't seem like the same as learning another religion like Christianity, and I think it was due to the perception of Islam around the world. I was 3 years old when the 911 happened, so I lived my whole life. I lived in an environment where I grew up thinking that Muslims were terrorists, and that was that. There wasn't a pre and post kind of thing. So I hid the fact that I was learning about Islam because I was afraid how people would view me, right? And it's great that nowadays we have channels like this channel that we are sharing convert stories to normalize the fact that learning about Islam is just about discovering a religion. It's no much different from someone exploring religion. Other religions like Christianity or Buddhism, is part of the process. And I also see myself, in I think 2019 when I first got serious about Islam, like what Brother Farah said, like it's like coming out of the matrix. I started to wear a kurta, I started to wear jubah, and I go to the mosque on Fridays. My family was so scared, and then the next month I told them I wanted to go for Umrah. So they thought that I was gonna get radicalized, and he got me back at home, and then did the intervention. They were like, no, you can't go, to Saudi Arabia. You can't go there because, it feels like you're going to join ISIS or something. And then I had to tell guys, there's McDonald's there. They have KFC too. So that was something that I really relate to. And, I really, when you were sharing your story, I thought back and I really recall these times where I had along my journey. So, with regards to terrorism and the perception of how Islam is viewed across the world, especially in US nowadays, right? And of course, I wouldn't have that experience in Singapore because we are quite a multi-religious society, right? How was your experience then, after becoming a Muslim and managing that identity as Muslim while trying to, keep yourself safe from the perception that Muslims are terrorists? How was your experience there in US?
Okay.
Well, I think that I really took that on for a lot of the time as a kind of responsibility. At least later, I guess, as I kind of developed myself, then I started to feel like a representative. When I, before I put on hijab, I was working in Manhattan in the middle of New York City, Times Square, in a retail store, and so I put on hijab in the middle of my time working there. And after wearing hijab, I noticed some of the things that happened. Like there was a person I spoke to on the phone, and then they had to come in and pick something up. And when they got there, they were like, oh, I didn't know you had that on your head. It was like, well, that's because you talked to me on the phone. Like, what are you talking about? You didn't know my shirt was red either. Like, what? So it was like this funny thing, like people, just interacting with people and realizing that they're so like weirded out by this idea that like a Muslim can be something other than what they saw in those movies when they grew up or what they saw on the media. And then I had other people where like here I was, a new Muslim, trying to really be patient, be kind, be like the best person I could possibly be. And then I actually had someone, a really tough customer, being so nasty and rude to me, and everyone else watching. And then when that customer left, people approached me and they said, how were you so patient? How did you handle that like that? And I was like, well, I'm a Muslim. So it was like this, I started to realize that no matter what I do, like I can help change people's perceptions just by how I behave and the fact that I'm a little bit different than what people expect. And so I really embrace that. And I actually love that. Like, I don't, some people get annoyed, like, oh, people asking me questions and where are you from and all this stuff. But I really love the opportunity for conversation. And I find that, there's the majority of people I believe have a lot of good in them. And, just because they've been sort of subliminally told something their entire lives, it's natural for them to believe that or feel that way. And so if I have a chance to change that perception, even by something so small, I'm so excited about that. The people, like, I just think about all the people that made a difference in my life through my journey, and the little bits and pieces of things they did. And like, they may never know that I ended up becoming a Muslim, but their words, their actions impacted me. And so I hope to just, and I don't do it for that reason. Like, I try genuinely to just be a good person because I want, to do what's right, and I want God to be pleased with me as well. But this is like a side benefit, I guess, that I hope that when I represent Islam to the people around me in one way or another, that it's a good representation. And I haven't really had, with that attitude, I have not really had many negative interactions. So I feel like the way you come across, like, whenever I walk outside, I try to hold my head up really high. I walk with confidence. I smile to people. I present myself in a certain way. And I think that makes a really big difference, because whether people talk to you or not, they get the sense of who you are. And if I had been like shy and embarrassed about, like, oh, I'm a Muslim, what are they going to think? What are they going to think about my hijab? What are they going to say to me? Then you're inviting that negative energy from people outside you. So it really depends on you. I feel the experience you have, to a large degree, depends on what you expect, what you intend, and then how you present yourself when you go out into the world. And I think that I really hope that so many more Americans will have the experience I did, and realize that, even if they don't accept Islam, realize that Islam is not something foreign. Islam is not something bad, but it is, like you said, another religion amongst so many other religions. And it's actually, like, when you look at it, it says, oh, mankind, it's meant for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Islam is a beautiful way of life. And in fact, I have the audience asking some questions. Maybe I can post their question out here. One is, why can't a person just be good without religion? Can't they just be kind and nice? Why do they need the religion to be kind? That's one question. Another one, okay, it says here, what is the main reason people revert to Islam quickly, where many countries are doing huge propaganda against Islam and Muslims? Yeah, this is a question from the audience.
Okay, nice questions. So the first one, why a religion? Why can't you just be a good person? So if you're a good person, without any faith, you don't believe in God, and you just are kind to people around you, then the only result you get from that is your kindness, and the way that it affects the other people around you, the way it affects you personally in the moment and in this life. But if you want to know really the answer to that question, you have to understand, why are you on earth in the first place? So you can't really answer that question without knowing why you're here. So if you're only here to be kind, and then you die and you turn to dust, fine, right? But how do you know there's not more to this life than that? And in order to know whether or not there's more to this life than that, first of all, you have to open your eyes, and you have to look at all of the signs around you. Look at the world, look at creation, look at the science that's coming out that explains, like, how the human body is created. Like, do you know that we have the bottom half of our retina have specific cells to receive the specific morning light that comes from the horizon, over the horizon?
Wow.
They're just designed perfectly. So knowing the purpose will answer your question. So if there's
Sorry,
no purpose,
you need to go back a sentence. I think the stream got cut off halfway.
Okay, so
yeah.
My point really is just that if you want to know your purpose, if you want to know if it's okay to just be nice, then you want to know what's your purpose. If you know your purpose, it will answer that question for you. If you're just here out of nothing and by chance, and there's no point of your life, then yeah, go ahead and just be nice, right? But then what's the difference if you're nice or you're not nice? There's no difference there, unless just for your own satisfaction. So I say you have to know the purpose of your life, and you have to actually work to find that out. You have to open your eyes, be open, curious, and willing to accept things that may not be what you want to accept in the first place.
I'd like to add to that as well. That what sister shared, I think it's very beautiful that she said that our retinas have different cells that take in the morning light. I didn't know about that until you said it. I think that's beautiful. The other thing is, okay, the question I like to tell the audience is, ask the audience, how do we know what is good when we have no form of measurement from the creator. Like, for example, you are using your own intellect to decide what is good, right? um Based on social norms, maybe, right? Maybe you think, oh yes, we should do this, yes, we should do that because it's good, and the effect is, the consequence are good. But that is what society tells you, right? That is good. For example, people in the past used to even marry young children, um, and they thought it was good, right? It was good to marry young. But now today, you say that is without consent. It's not right. So if you use social norms to be your, how to say, your baseline of telling you what good is, then it changes all the time, because it's the men decided, men who came up with this thinking, right? But now the creator is telling you, this is the rules and these are the baseline that you need to follow. So that would be a more solid foundation of truth. And in that essence, even in the Bible, they say that heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass. In the Quran, Allah also says that Allah is not a person who changes his mind, because he knows exactly everything to the little details, right?
Right.
Not a leaf falls in the forest without his knowledge.
Right.
So in the essence, the creator is someone who knows everything. Okay, so that's my part of that ad. So the second question, regarding
Yeah.
people reverting to Islam
Yeah.
quickly.
Okay.
So how do we overcome this huge propaganda against Islam and Muslims?
Well, I think that first of all, it's people can become very fearful of it, like, oh no, they're telling everyone Islam is bad. But actually, the people who are there are so many people that, had it not been for this bad propaganda, they would never have ever had the need to learn about Islam, and they would have never accepted Islam. I hear story after story after story of people who converted, that the reason they converted, it initially started because of the propaganda, the negative press that they heard about Islam. And so, things are not always what they seem. Things that are, people may attempt, and it's part of that thing that, like, how you were saying, God knows everything. Nothing happens without his will, first of all, so relax. And, they plan, but God plans as well. And so just because the plan of the human beings looks very daunting, and it looks scary, and it looks powerful, God is always more powerful. And so many people's, their lives have been changed in the opposite way that the propaganda intended, because of the propaganda in the first place. Like me, I don't know if Islam would have been in my project if I ever would have researched it, had, not to say that there's a good thing behind 9/11. Many people died, and it's awful and horrible. But had that campaign that happened afterwards against Islam not happened, maybe I wouldn't have been so, adamant about, like, I need to study Islam now. And so, in the negativity, there's, so many people who become Muslim is because they tried to prove Islam was wrong. They believed it was wrong in the first place. So I wouldn't worry about that as much. But also, like, one more thing, just quick, for the Muslims, like we were discussing earlier, like, what are we doing in the world? What kind of impact are we having? There's very powerful people out there who their goal is to spread negative information about Islam, or negative, really, lies about Islam. But we, alhamdulillah, you have this podcast. But I think that whatever we do in our lives, whatever our roles are, we have a chance to make an impact, a positive impact, through our own behavior. And it doesn't have to be through, like, dawah or podcasts, or, handing out books or something. It could just be from the way that you live your life.
I think that's very beautifully said. And also to add to that, all of us are probably, thinking the same, to a follow-up question. Like people say, why do bad things happen even when there's God around, right? And you perfectly said that God has bigger plans for us and things that we can't see. Remember, he's the creator. He sees the seen and unseen, where we only see what we can see with our five senses, maybe, right? So having said that, sometimes we use all our intellect and our ability to think that we know everything, but the creator knows better than us. I think you perfectly say that. Yeah. So finally, would you be kind to share with us, our an advice maybe to new reverts and also to people who are searching for the meaning of life?
Okay, so first I would say people searching for the meaning of life, I'll start there because they haven't got there yet. I think the biggest thing is that you look into yourself for sincerity. When you want to know the truth, like, first of all, do you really want to know the truth, or do you want the answer to be something that you feel comfortable with and that sort of validates your beliefs that you already hold? And so being really open-minded, stripping away your bias, stripping away your attachment to the results of your investigation is critical. So you have to be sincere in your desire to actually know. And then you have to be willing at some level to accept the truth, even when it doesn't look how you expected it to look. So those would be the two advice for those people. And I believe that if you have that sincerity and you want to know, you're going to be guided to the truth no matter what. And when people are not, then, God is the guide. He's the one who guides. And so if someone's guided, it's because God guided them. And if someone's not guided, then there's probably something going on there where they're actually not really fully willing or fully sincere about their desire to know the truth. When you become Muslim, some advice, take a deep breath. Take it easy, and remember always what led you to accept the truth in the first place. I think that's very important because your faith will go up and it will go down. There'll be pressure from outside you and sometimes from within you. And going back to your original reason is really helpful because it makes you remember how you got there in the first place. So for me, if people tell me things and they make me start to feel icky about something, especially sometimes with some of these rules or some of the fatwas and stuff, and you start to feel I don't know, did I do something wrong, did I make the wrong choice? You have to go back to what brought you here in the first place, because that's the real foundation. That's when you were connected only with who is your creator and why are you here on earth. You have to go back to that every now and then. So that would be a number one advice. And then number two is to be easy on yourself. People outside you, they don't know what's inside you. They only see the surface. They may intend the best thing for you by telling you what to do or trying to help you in your journey, but you have to really know yourself. So you have to say thank you to all the advice outside, take what works for you. But if you can't do it all, it's okay. This is between you and God. And so, every step you take towards him is a positive thing. And if you're not taking 20 steps and so next door says you have to be taking all of those 20 steps, that's not them. That's not their responsibility. They have a good intention, but that's not their responsibility. And they're not going to answer for your actions. You are. So you have to do it at your own pace, and you have to follow the trajectory that feels better and natural to you. Because if you do everything, but then next week you decide to leave Islam, it's a mistake. So take your steps really gradually and methodically, and make sure you listen to your own heart and really maintain your connection with the Creator. Your connection with the Creator is the most important thing. And then your correct connection with the Qur'an, with you reading and understanding the Qur'an, not what other people say about the Qur'an. So those would be my biggest advice.
Beautiful and beautifully well said. And in fact, just to also add on to what you said, Allah said this. In the hadith, it says that, you take one step towards me, I will take 10 steps towards you. And if you walk towards me, I will run towards you. That's how much Allah will want to be with you and to walk with you in this journey of your life as well. I think you made such a beautiful impact on us today as well with your story and all the beautiful advice that you share us. We thank you so much, Sister Danielle, for doing this for us and to share your beautiful story. So we've come to the end of the stream, everyone, and inshallah, of course, we will bring Sister Danielle back if we have have other questions for her as well. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in tonight. Next week will be the last episode of season 2 for the Shaherald Nightlife, and we'll be going on a break for a while. And inshallah, we'll be back again. So tonight, I'd like to wish everyone Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for tuning in. Good night, everyone.
Right.